anxiety and overthinking have been invading all of your thoughts, you need to hear this before you lose another night's sleep. You can't stop overthinking and anxiety from happening, but you can change the way you handle it. And once you see it, you'll never unsee it again. There's one passage in the Bible that completely flips overthinking and anxiety on its head, and chances are you've read right through it or read right past it many, many times. In today's show, we're going to break down that passage and see how to beat overthinking and anxiety. My name is Tammy Rotzel from the website Footprints of Inspiration and a Faithful God podcast, where I teach women how to let go of that need for perfection in their faith walk so they can show up perfectly imperfect and create a deep and meaningful relationship with God. Now, for those of you who have been with me a long time, and by the way, those who are joining me new, welcome, welcome. But listen, I am not at home in my studio. I am actually in a hotel room. I'm traveling right now, so I know the sound isn't great and the lighting isn't great, but we're going to just keep rolling with it, my friend. So let's dig in. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 5 through 7, it teaches us, likewise, you younger people, submit yourselves to your elders. Yes, all of you be submissive, to one another, and be clothed with humility. For God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your care upon him, for he cares for you. Now, there are several key things inside this passage that we really need to take a look at. Number one is having that posture of humility. When we go to God, we need to humble ourselves. We need to be open and have a teachable heart. By the way, if you haven't done so already, I actually have an episode all about what it means to have a teachable heart and how to show up in your prayers with a teachable heart. I'll actually take and drop a link for that in the show notes for you below. But we've got to have a spirit of humility when we're going to God. Because you see, pride equals self-reliance. When we have pride, it shows that we're relying on ourselves, which always fuels anxiety. But when we are humble, when we show up with God with humility in our hearts, it shows that we're dependent on him, that we are depending on God for this, and it opens the door to his peace, that peace that transcends all understanding. And we're going to get into that more in just a moment. We also see in this passage the importance of humbling ourselves under the mighty hand of God. When we humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God, that both protects us and it delivers us from that anxiety, those spiraling emotions that we all get from time to time. A thought comes in, and next thing we know, we're feeling anxious, we're worried, we're overthinking everything. But when we humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God, Scripture tells us that's where we are both protected and delivered from that anxiety and overthinking. The third thing we have to look at inside this passage is the casting of our cares to the Lord, right? What does this tell us? This tells us this isn't a passive act. You see, when we come into relationship with God, we actually enter into a partnership with God. And that means there are things that we must do. There are action steps that we must take. And inside this passage, by the way, in every single passage, you really need to look at that. What are the action words? What is God teaching me to do or instructing me to do? And so in this one, it's saying cast your cares. Now, here's the thing. When I was growing up, my papa, he would go to Canada every single summer, spend the entire summer there and fish. He'd put his camper on the back of his truck and he would fish. And there were lots of times that we actually got to go up there as well. And I can remember my papa actually taking me out in the john boat. We'd go into the middle of the lake and he was teaching me how to cast a line, right? How to use my fishing pole to cast out and reel in a fish. And so with that, what we had to do, we had to actually release the line first, right? The line that's within that reel. We had to release the line, and then we had to cast out so that the line and the hook and the sinker and all that would go out far into the water, right? Casting isn't passive. Casting is intentionally, forcibly, and repeatedly throwing that line out. It's doing it intentionally, forcibly and repeatedly, casting that out into the water, casting our fears, our worries, that anxiety, that overthinking, those spiraling thoughts, casting those to God. It was intentional, it was forceful, and it was repeated. Now in Psalms chapter 55, verse 22, it teaches us, cast your cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. Something I teach inside all of my programs, both Confident Prayer Warrior and the Grow Your Faith community, what I teach in there is we've got to look for those if-then situations throughout Scripture. Not only are we looking for action words, but we're also looking for those if-then situations throughout Scripture, throughout the Bible. And in this verse, again, it says, cast your cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. He will never let the righteous be shaken. So if we cast our cares on the Lord, then he will sustain us. If we cast our cares onto the Lord, our worries, our fears, our anxious thoughts, that overthinking, if we cast that to the Lord, he will again sustain us, and he will not let us be shaken. If then. So what does that mean for you and I? That means we have to get into the presence of God. And we'll dive into that in just a moment. But what we've got to understand from this passage is that humility paired with casting, paired with that intentional, forceful releasing, right? And repeatedly releasing. We've got to do that again and again. And when paired with humility, we're surrendering our cares, our worries, that overthinking, that anxiety over to God and allowing him to take control. We're releasing our control and allowing him to do that. Now, does this mean it's going to happen the first time? You're going to feel that peace, right? You're going to feel all of that immediately? No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean that you're going to experience that maybe the second time or the third time or the fifth time or the ninth time you do this. You see, again, we have to be intentional, forceful, and we have to repeat it. We have to get persistent and consistent in our pursuit of his peace. Now, I want to be very clear about something. This doesn't mean we go to God to achieve his peace. This means we go to God to receive his peace. And when we humble ourselves before him, when we come to him with that open, willing, teachable heart, then we cast that out forcibly, right? Intentionally, forcibly, repeatedly. Then we receive his peace. Then we open our hearts to receive his peace. So as I just said, that means we've got to get into the presence of God. And right about now, you're probably throwing out one of those yeah buts. Yeah, but Tammy, you don't know how busy I am. Yeah, but Tammy, you don't know just how crazy my days are. I don't have time to sit down and pray quietly to God all throughout the day or multiple times throughout the day. I beg to differ. Because you see, when you use prayer anchoring, let me back up. When you get that sacred start to your day where you're connecting with him before you even pick up your phone in the morning, before you even get out of bed, when you're connecting with him all throughout the day through breath prayers and prayer anchoring, again, if you've been following me for any length of time, this isn't about creating more time in your day. This is about learning how to create a lifestyle of connection with God, about inviting him in all throughout the day. And you do that with that sacred start, with those breath prayers, with that prayer anchoring. And so what we've got to do is we've got to get into the presence of God. It doesn't have to be long. It can be just just a minute or so, or a few seconds or so in the midst of the chaos, in the midst of those spiraling emotions, those spiraling overthinking thoughts, that spiraling anxiety. We can do this. Now, Philippians chapter 4, verses 6-7. This is a verse I have no doubt you've also read over and over and over again. But there are some things in there that we really need to dissect. We really need to understand. And here it says, don't be anxious about things, instead pray. Don't be anxious about things, instead pray. If we want to beat that overthinking and spiraling anxiety, when it happens, we have to learn to stop and pray instead in the midst of it. Now, this passage goes on to say, pray about everything. He longs to hear your requests, so talk to God about your needs and be thankful for what has come. And know that the peace of God, A peace that is beyond any and all of our human understanding will stand watch over your hearts and minds in Jesus, the Anointed One. A peace that goes beyond anything you and I could ever understand when we get into the presence of God, when we create those habits, those spiritual habits of when the anxiety, not if, but when those anxious thoughts come up, when that overthinking starts to spiral out of control, we have to get into that habit of turning to Him. Again, it's not going to happen the first time. It's not going to happen the second time. This is where we have to create those new spiritual habits, create so that it becomes second nature, that when these things happen, it becomes second nature that we turn to God, that we get into His presence, that when the anxious thoughts come, that's when we start to experience God's peace, that peace that goes above any human understanding. That peace that doesn't make sense to us. Now, I'm going to share a little story with you here in just a moment. But before I do, the other thing we see inside this passage is the importance of thanksgiving even before we see the outcome change. That posture of thanksgiving, even when we're in the midst of the anxiety, even when we're in the midst of that spiraling overthinking, when we are thankful, it opens us up to receive all God has. Now, right about now, you may be throwing out another, yeah, but Tammy, I've got nothing to be thankful for. I'm so worried. I can't hardly think straight. That's all. It's consuming every single thought. I'm here to tell you, my friend, there's something to be thankful for. I know that's tough love, but there is. I promise you that. You can be thankful that God is here with you, even if you don't feel His presence, right? Feelings aren't facts, but we know, whether we feel it or not, whether we feel Him or not, we know He's with us. And so we can be thankful for that, right? Start out small. But thankfulness is key to opening ourselves up. That's showing God, coming before Him with that posture of humility, that posture of that teachable heart, opening ourselves up. And thankfulness is the way to do that. Now, I've got an entire podcast episode all about how to fight life's battles with a 4-step battle plan. It's based on 2 Chronicles chapter 20, when King Jehoshaphat was facing that mighty battle. I actually walk you through that passage, and we see the 4-step battle plan. But one of those steps, and by the way, I will put the link for it in the show notes below. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll also put it up at the very end of this video as well. But in that 4-step battle plan, one of the steps is thankfulness. Thankfulness opens our heart to receive all God has for us. Now, not long ago, I actually was in a situation that I have to be in this situation periodically, every year. It's just one of those things. And it's a situation that's really hard for me. It's one that has just caused a lot of pain over the years and such. And as I was going into this situation, I was praying and, just asking God to prepare my heart, to help me to walk this out in a way that honors Him, right? To be kind and loving and respectful and compassionate. And I got into this situation, and one of the same, something happened again that happens every single time that I'm in this situation. It's so frustrating, right? It's so frustrating, and you're just, you just want it to end. But one of the things that I did when I got into this situation and something was said again, at that point, I went off by myself. I sat there and I prayed to God, and I was forceful. First and foremost, I thank God. I said, Lord, I know you're with me right now. I can't feel you, but I know you are. And Lord, I am so thankful for that. But then what I said was, you know what, Lord? I know how you want me to be. I know that you want me to walk in love in this situation. However, I can't. I'm done. I'm tired of the comments. I'm tired of, all the things that go on in this particular situation. And I was forcefully, right? I was intentionally, forcefully casting those feelings out to God. And I said, Lord, I can't do it anymore. If you want me to behave that way, if you want me to walk this out in a way that honors you, then you've got to put a super on the natural and fill me with it, because I can't do it. I'm done. I'm tired. I can't do it on my own. And you know what? He did. I was able to walk through that period of time, that situation, with love. I was able to let things roll off my back. I was able to feel peace in the midst of it, even with, the stuff that was going on. But you see, so number one, I was intentionally, right? I went right to God. I thanked him. And then I intentionally and forcefully cast that to him. And I kept doing it every day. And when I feel things start to boil up again, I do it again. I repeatedly did it. And you see, that's the same thing that God will do for you. It took time preparing. I was preparing my heart. I was opening my heart leading up to the situation. And so that's what you've got to do too. If you want to beat that overthinking and that anxiety, you've got to repeatedly go to God. You've got to thank God in the midst of it. And you've got to forcefully, intentionally, and repeatedly cast that out to him. Thanksgiving shifts our perspective from fear to faith, even before the outcome changes. Let me repeat that, my friend. Thanksgiving, when we go to God with that thankful heart, when we are thanking him in the midst of it, it changes our perspective from fear to faith, even before the outcome changes. That's when you're going to send me a note. That's when you're going to send me an email and say, Tammy, you're not going to believe this. I did what you said. I humbly came before God. I was thankful in the midst of it, and I cast it out to him. That's when you're going to say, nothing has changed, yet everything has changed. I can't tell you how many emails I've gotten over the years, over these past 9 years of working with women, how many emails I've gotten that have said, Tammy, I did that. I was intentional. I got frustrated, but I was persistent and consistent in my pursuit of God, and nothing has changed, but everything has changed. Why? Because if we do these things, when we've come into partnership with God, if we do these things, then God's peace will fill us. If we do these things, then God will sustain us. He will not let us be shaken. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take some time, grab a piece of paper, a prayer journal, a notebook, a scrap piece of paper laying around, doesn't matter. But grab that. If you can put it in your prayer journal, that would be better, just so that you've got somewhere, a place to go back and look. But anyway, what I want you to do is I want you to pick one anxiety that really starts to cause those spiraling emotions, that overthinking. Pick one thing this week. Write it down in your prayer journal. Start walking through these steps. Humility, right? Humble yourself, cast that out, humble yourself, thank God in the midst of it, and cast it. Intentionally, forcefully, and repeatedly. Write down what you did. Write down what you were feeling in this. And then as you start to see God move in your life, I want you to go back and write that down as well. What did God do? Why do we do that, right? It's not enough to just hear these lessons, my friend. If we truly want to beat that overthinking and that anxiety, we've got to take action, right? We can't just listen to a lesson. We've got to take action. And so by doing this, you're taking action. And then the next time it happens, because it's not a matter of if, it's when, right? It's going to happen. But what you're going to do then is be able to go back and look at what you had before and say, oh my goodness, I remember that now. I remember how I was feeling then. I see what God did here in this moment. And that's going to help you learn to rely on him more. It's going to help you learn how to trust him more. And that's going to start creating those habits that become second nature for you when the anxiety and overthinking creep in. Here's the thing. You aren't broken. This anxiety, this overthinking is not a character flaw, my friend. Did you catch that? I really need you to hear this. You're not broken, and it's not a character flaw. In fact, next week, we're actually going to dive into this more. These attacks are not random. There's a strategy behind them. And like I said, next week, we're going to talk about that strategy. I'll teach you how to fight differently. We'll go a little bit deeper in this and teach you how to fight differently when it comes to beating that overthinking and that anxiety. I'll teach you how to build a first response plan to this. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you subscribe wherever you are listening. Also, you can send me you can sign up for the emails at footprintsofinspiration.com/subscribe. And then what I'll do is every single week, I will send you a brand new episode that comes out. So you've always got it and you know when it's there. So again, footprintsofinspiration.com/subscribe. So I will meet you back here next week for a brand new episode of A Faithful God Podcast.